Now to my favorite part of the program, which is getting to answer your questions and to hear from our scholars. You can see on the screen we have 5, and actually this is current scholar perspective, and that's inaccurate because Troy Gilchrist has actually already graduated, so he's one of our alums at this point. But we have 5 scholars with us. You can see on the screen the university that they are attending and their major, their current major. And I will actually ask them all to unmute their mics and their cameras so that they can join us for the Q&A. Welcome, scholars, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can see their beautiful faces. We were actually going to start because you got to see what their major is and which university they're attending. So we're going to start actually by having them share some advice with all of you. What is something they wish they had known when they were in your shoes? So Eugenia, since you are our newest scholar and most recently in their shoes, I will actually ask you to unmute yourself and start us off.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for attending this session. It's so nice to see so many of you here. As Anne said, so I am a freshman, so this whole college application process is definitely still fresh on my mind. And I want you guys to all apply for sure. I highly encourage each and every one of you to apply. At least just shoot your shot. You will never know what will happen as a result of that. I can tell you that I didn't think I would be in the position, talking to prospective or high school seniors right now, prospective applicants about being a scholar. And so you never know, where you will end up. And don't be afraid to put your whole self out there, be authentic within your application. There isn't necessarily just one type of Flinn Scholar, as you can see, and you'll see with all the panelists today that we are all so different. There's hundreds of things that make us, each and every one of us, super unique. And so don't be afraid to highlight that within your application, and for sure take advantage of all the essays, the short answer questions to highlight a different part of yourself and to show what makes you unique for sure.
Thank you. Claire, do you want to go next?
Yes. So what I wish I had known when I was in your shoes, and I know Anne talked about this earlier, so I guess I should first say I wish I had gone to this information session when I was applying, but I ended up changing my major around a little bit, and I wish I had known that that was totally okay to do. When I was walking into one of my interviews, I kind of secretly asked a scholar, I was like, what if I decide that I don't want to do astronomy anymore? Well, what will happen to me then? And so you're totally okay to change who you are and to change how you want to help Arizona. And Flinn Foundation gives you the opportunity and the flexibility to do that. So don't be afraid to change who you are. Your application reflects who you are right now, in your shoes right here. So if you decide to change yourself as you go through college, which happens to all of us, then that's totally okay.
Thank you, Claire. Edgar, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. Something that I wish I had known when I was in your guys' shoes was how important it is to find a school that matches you, matches your interests. Coming from a small city, I felt like I had to leave Arizona, go to a big university. But after talking to some of the college reps and actually going and visiting the campuses, which is why I recommend you guys do the Tri University link that they had posted, I ended up learning that staying in Arizona, it is the same as going out of state. You're going to have lots of opportunities, whether you're wanting to go down the medical route, go into music or art. You can do that here in Arizona. And now that I'm here at the U of A, staying here in Arizona, I know I made the right choice.
Thank you. And Caroline?
I definitely relate to what everyone said so far. I'm going to take a slightly different vein with mine, which is it's definitely important to focus on what you want to do, where you want to apply, and focus on your applications. But it's also really important not to let yourself get so stressed out about everything you need to do to apply to college that you forget about your senior year of high school and you don't take time to enjoy it with your friends and at your school and everything that happens in your senior year. So just don't stress out too much. Everything will work out the way that it's meant to. And there's a lot to enjoy in your senior year of high school also.
I love that message. I wish that telling them to not stress out was something that we actually had the power to have, truly come to fruition for every student who's listening tonight. Troy, do you want to take the?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. it's really important to enjoy and reflect, because I do think pretty soon the whole new world of opportunities is going to open to you, regardless of where you go or your next steps. So I do think it's a good time right now to really kind of figure out and really know who you are, so that you're ready and excited for the next steps, because there's lots of opportunity for everyone on this call.
I love it. So I'm scrolling through the questions right now, looking at which ones, and I want to make sure that I find one that's best for you all, because it looks like some of the first ones that I'm seeing are probably better just process for me. Oh, this is a good one. What are your best tips for writing application essays that really show our personalities? Who would like to take that?
I'll take this first. So when I was writing my essays, it took me a long time to kind of figure out what I wanted to talk about. It's kind of nice that they give you 3 to write, so that you can explore different parts of yourself in either of the essays, and you can not just talk about one thing. My best tip is to just be yourself. You can be funny, or you can be sad. You can put emotion into your essay. And the more real you make it about yourself, the better it's going to be. The essays are short, which for me, that makes it hard. I like writing a lot, but making it short lets us know that you can be concise. You can give us your ideas in a way that makes sense, and that's also important. So this is a way to show that you're a good writer too. So put both of those together and you'll have a really great essay.
I love that. Does anyone else have advice on that? Because I think that comes up a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I tell this to a lot of people when working. I know I'm doing it for graduate school right now. Is to always think about what can only you share, or what story can only you tell, because we all have a different background, we all have different experiences. Even if they're similar, there's unique aspects of our lives that doesn't match up with everyone else. And so I think the important part is really sharing what's that special component of your story that other people might have heard about or might have thought about, but is a specific struggle for you, or something that you've been able to overcome. So I always highlight that, because sometimes we want to avoid those parts of ourselves, but I think they make the best letters and most interesting stories.
I really like that. And Caroline, it looks like you had something to add.
Yes, the only thing I would add, I definitely agree with what you guys said, but the only thing I would add is don't be so afraid to be slightly informal in your essay. I'm not saying you shouldn't use proper grammar. You should always use proper grammar and everything like that. But I know a lot of us tend to get so focused on writing academic essays for school or writing research papers that we start to lose our own voice in our writing, and it becomes sort of monotonous, robotic academic format. It's okay to be a little bit more casual and to sort of express yourself in your own authentic voice, not sound like you're writing a paper for your class.
I love that. Edgar, I'm gonna, I'll open this up to anyone, but one of our attendees wants to know if you can share examples of ways that you've engaged in research and gained connections as a result of being a scholar. So that's, kind of 2 questions, but Edgar, do you want to start?
All right. So personally, I never did research, and that has to be my biggest regret now as a senior, unfortunately. I just always kept saying that I wasn't smart enough to be in research, but that's not the case. I mean, the professors at your universities are always gladly wanting to accept students. I know my professors did. They would always say, oh, I have a lab position opening up. But through the Flinn Scholarship, I was able to meet my mentor. He is director of the asthma allergy program here at the U of A, and he has his own lab dealing with the respiratory system and cystic fibrosis. And he had invited me at first and said, now that I got to know you a little bit more, do you want to work in my lab? And at that moment I said no, but I wish I could go back and say that, I definitely at least take a, try it at first. And if you don't like it, then you can always just leave the lab. But yeah, definitely a research opportunity I feel like everyone should go through, whether it is science related or social science. Because even as a political science major, they would always offer research labs, and I did not know that existed for social sciences. And that is pretty interesting as well.
Great advice. Does anyone else have an experience to share or connections that they've made by being a Flinn Scholar?
I can share mine. So I'm currently doing research with two different professors at NAU. One of them, my advisor, is the associate chair of the Astronomy and Planetary Science Department. And I actually started doing research before I was even in college and before, well, I guess it was after I had accepted my place at NAU. But part of the process with the Flinn Scholars is that if you make it a little bit farther, you'll have an opportunity to go visit each university, and oftentimes they'll let you meet and greet with the staff. And I just started talking to one of the professors there, and they're like, hey, we have a research opportunity. And I jumped on it and started researching the summer before my freshman year, and I've kept with it since. So there's lots of opportunities that'll kind of just jump out of nowhere, and you have the opportunity to take it, and you should if you want to, if you feel comfortable doing that. And it's been great. I've had lots of research opportunities, so that's really cool.
That's great. Troy, it looks like you had something to share.
Yeah, I mean, I know at ASU we have some really cool labs, and I actually got connected to the lab because one of them it's called the Luminosity Lab, and we have a long history of Flinn Scholars who have worked in the lab, and so I actually got connected to that because of current scholars who were working there. And it was really fascinating. I'm more of a data person, economics and data analytics, but we a lot of our research was on how we could apply that to solve big problems in the world. And so that's definitely one of my favorite experiences I had at ASU, and it came directly through the Flinn Scholarship.
That's great. I've heard many of our scholars tell us that even during finalist visits at the universities, they ended up securing opportunities to do research on campus, and they weren't even yet awarded the Flinn Scholarship. So I do know that there are great opportunities and connections made even at the semifinalist and finalist stage. Another question I'd love to have you guys address, the question says, which teachers did you get letters of recommendation from? And I'd like to expand on that and just ask you all to share what advice you have for getting strong letters of recommendations, both from counselor and teachers. Who wants to start?
I can start with this one off.
Okay.
So as far as recommendations, I of course had one teacher that I was super close with. You guys might have a teacher that you are really close with that like automatically comes in your head when it comes to recommendations, or you have that college counselor. But if not, you should ultimately just try to find someone who you were a really good student in their class, that you showed interest in their class, and that you just weren't one of the students there, that they know your name, that they know who you are, that they know how hard you work. And also, don't be afraid to remind them of, who you were in their class, what projects you did well on, and how you did. One thing that I did with all of my recommendation letters from teachers, so I had 2 teachers and 1 counselor, was also to email them, show them what I would love for them to highlight as part of my application. That way they could show one side of me, another teacher could show another side of me, my counselor could show a different side of me. And so really just don't be afraid to ask one of your teachers, whoever it may be. Maybe you already have that connection with someone, or even if you're afraid to reach out, don't be afraid to reach out for sure.
Great. Anybody else have? I know Eugenia is closest to the experience of asking teachers for recommendations. Caroline?
I definitely agree with everything you said about how to find your teachers you want to recommend, just sort of in terms of how to go through that process. I would also add to definitely ask your recommenders as early as you possibly can, because they're going to get asked by a lot of different students to write recommendation letters, and you want to give them enough time to really think about it and reflect and write a good letter for you. Not, hey, I need a letter in 24 hours. Can you do that? So you want to give them enough time, and then don't be afraid to be a little bit pushy if it's getting close to the deadline and they haven't turned in your recommendation. They're going to be very busy. They're going to have lots of other students. It's okay to send a reminder email and just like, hey, you might have forgotten, but the deadline for my application is in 1 week. Do you still think you have time to write a recommendation letter? Is there anything I can do to help you? Just so it's fresh on their mind, and you can make sure that you're doing everything you can to help and support them.
I can see here that that Eugenia, I'm still getting used to the Q&A function, but it shows that Eugenia wants to answer one of these questions, which I imagine most of you would enjoy answering, which is, what is your favorite part of the Flinn Scholars program? So Eugenia, you can start us off.
I mean, I am a freshman. However, the community and all the people that you meet throughout this program, even if you don't end up being a scholar, I definitely highly encourage you to, network. Well, if you know what networking is, just talk with all these different scholars. You can feel free to email us. I think we might be able to send our emails to you all later if you ever have any questions. But this community is absolutely insane. And I know one person in the chat or in the Q&A box was asking, I'm a psychology, or I want to do a psychology. Should I still apply to the Flinn Scholarship? Well, I'm finance. I know choice economics. We have all different majors here represented. And so I think my favorite part of this whole scholarship program is for sure the community of people that you will meet. And I highly encourage you to so one thing as well, don't think of the other applicants as your competition. Think of them more so as your potential future friends, future roommates. I know all three of my roommates are Flinn Scholars, and I talked to people that were Flinn semifinalists as well, or that at least applied to the Flinn Scholarship, because this community is incredibly insane, and you meet people throughout this process that, will end up sticking with you for however, long that will be.
Who else would like to answer that question?
I have to agree a ton with the community aspect. I know I really believe that idea of the competition, not viewing anyone else as your competition, because ultimately at the end of the day, everyone I'm now that I had the opportunity to meet, I've also been able to work with them over the years on different projects. And so if the mindset was, they're just competitors or something like that, you would miss out on great connections that I think I know I'm going to have for life. One aspect that I know I had, and not everyone has had, but the opportunity to travel when it comes back is just amazing, and the experience, the cultural experience that you'll have is totally different. But I think it broadens your worldview in a way that not a lot of other opportunities will, and you definitely wouldn't be able to do if you went off to an Ivy League school or went somewhere else, because it would not be covered for you. So I think that's one of the parts that is underlooked. I think it's not valued properly, because it's pretty amazing.
Anyone else want to share their favorite? If it's if it's all the same, then we can just move on to next questions. I want to share a response to some questions that I'm seeing that are popping up regularly. One, because we're all talking about the Honors College experiences, are students required to be in the Honors College? And the short answer is yes. If a student doesn't graduate with honors, that's sometimes happens. Not everyone has the ability to complete honors, but we do expect all of our scholars to be in the Honors College unless they have a really compelling reason not to be. There are just way too many benefits to being a part of the Honors College experience. So again, regardless of whether or not you choose to apply for the Flinn Scholarship, I would encourage all of you to consider being a part of the Honors College, because there really are remarkable opportunities there. Students are not automatically admitted to the Honors College just because they've advanced in our process, and they do have separate applications. So we encourage you to apply to all three. In terms of the kinds of costs that are covered, students receive tuition and fees from the university. So if you get a lumberjack scholarship or a president scholarship, that's usually the same award that will pay for the tuition that the university is providing. So you're not going to get the tuition scholarship and a lumberjack scholarship, because those are coming from the same pot of money. On top of your tuition and fees that are covered by the university, the Flinn Foundation provides semester funding, and that's intended to cover your housing and food. I already mentioned earlier the funding that we provide for travel abroad. So that's what the funding structure looks like. There were a couple of questions about majors, and I wonder, Caroline, maybe do you want to start and share with us a little bit about how you went about selecting your major?
Sure. So I know you saw on the first slide, but I'm a double major in computer science and Spanish. Then I have minors in molecular and cellular biology and psychology. I do want to preface with the fact that you don't have to be a double major and double minor. I just chose to do that. It's not at all required. But my path to picking my majors was kind of strange. I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do when I was starting my senior year of high school. I knew I liked biology, hence the bio minor now, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. And I'd taken a few programming classes in high school. First programming class actually was required, and I showed up in the course, and I thought that I was. Very first day, we had to download a piece of, and I had to stay after class for an hour. I couldn't.
Caroline, I'm not sure what's happening, but it sounds like your audio is breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is a little bit angry right now. Basically, I had no idea what I wanted to do. When I started computer science, I thought I was going to be terrible at it. I had a required class in high school, and the very first day, I didn't know how to do anything. I thought it would go horribly, but I ended up really loving it after a couple weeks. The spring semester of my senior year, I called all of the colleges that I'd applied to as a bio major, and I said, can I switch to be a CS major? I want to do computer science now. And I emailed the foundation. I was like, I know I put computer science as like a potential thing I might consider. I'm actually majoring in it now. I've switched it at all my universities. So you definitely don't have to know what you want to do. I started in computer science classes in college. I absolutely loved them. And I just had a Spanish minor because I wanted something a little bit different. I finished my Spanish minor after 2 semesters, and I realized I did not want to be done with my Spanish courses. So now I have a double major. So it's okay to take classes also in majors and minors that you might not necessarily want to do for a career, but that just interest you and you think are fun, could be a good supplement. So that's sort of how I set up my career path.
That's great. Does anyone else want to share about what it was like for them to navigate selecting, their major path? Okay, Edgar.
Freshman year is probably the best year that you can experiment with other classes. You can always take introduction classes to some majors and see how you feel about the material. I went in as a biochemistry major, and then the second I landed at the U of A at orientation, I switched to political science because I wanted to go down the politics route. But my first year, I did take some introductory molecular cellular biology classes, and that semester for sure sealed the deal that I was going to pick up molecular cellular biology as a major. So don't be afraid to take some classes just because you're curious your freshman year, because you might end up liking them.
Great. A couple of other questions that have popped up that I'll answer real quick. Quite a few questions about class rank. And I will tell you that if you are not in the top 5% of your class, it does not immediately exclude you from consideration for the scholarship. We ultimately are looking for, really strong candidates that hold all of those other things that I described that are much more important than being in the top 5% of your class. So if you're in the 6th or 7th percentile, it also depends on the size of your graduating class. That could really impact your class rank. So we really hope that you will look at your overall application, look at your experience, what you've been involved in, ways that you've contributed and excelled in high school. And, if you feel like you've got a strong application, do not let the class rank be the reason that you don't apply. So that is not a hard, fast stop when we're looking at applications. I saw another question about recommendations from counselors. And just to reiterate, if you do not have a counselor to write a recommendation for you, something to keep in mind that the recommendation from the counselor side, they provide a lot of valuable information for us about not just you as a student, but also the high school. We learn about the high school population, the number of advanced coursework that are available there, what the graduation rate is, those kinds of things. So the counselor is providing all of that information in addition to your transcript. If they don't know you well enough to write the recommendation part of it, answer the questions about your character and the way that you show up, in the school, then that's fine. You will not be penalized for not having that portion of the recommendation. If you're at a school that doesn't have a high school counselor, which we know that happens sometimes, you can have any administrator at the school, whether it's a principal or an assistant principal, who has access to your transcripts. They are able to fill out that recommendation form for you. So if you have any special circumstances, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly at the Scholars Program, and we can provide really, custom answers based on your experience. Let's see, more questions. Something I'm curious to hear, students often have a lot of questions about activities, and I'm curious to know how did you all go about reflecting on the activities that you'd been involved in, what you shared on your application, just in general, what was the process like for you, kind of synthesizing your high school years into an application and choosing what to write about your activities and involvement? And do you have any advice around that? I feel like when it comes to filling out applications, I keep picking on Eugenia because she was in our most recent cycle.
So I was a person who wanted to do absolutely everything. And if you did not do that, that is totally normal. That is totally fine. But for me personally, I founded a Spanish club. I was part of the tennis team. I did a ton of things. And so when it came to the application, it was super hard to see, okay, what is Flinn going to see most valuable? What should I be writing about? And you don't necessarily have to think, okay, what's going to be most valuable? If anything, I think I would consider what's most unique. What is something that someone else doesn't have? Troy touched on this a lot, a little bit earlier as well. What's something that someone else probably doesn't have? For me, it was founding the Spanish club, bringing my story. You have that essay, tell us your story. We'll really use that to highlight, what you did. Then maybe there's something unique about yourself that you did. And if you don't have that, well, still don't be afraid to highlight absolutely everything that you did. If there was a really small thing in your life, but that was still made an impact in yourself, feel free to put that on there, and really just be sure that, you really take the time to self-reflect on everything that's been important to you, what you're passionate about, and don't be afraid to highlight absolutely everything on there.
Yeah, I have something to add on to that. I think what you said is great. And I also think you should consider, out of all the activities or what you did and didn't do, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a lot, what shaped you the most to become who you are today? Because maybe you were on the basketball team, which a lot of people are, and maybe you had one thing about that really shaped you, and it could happen to someone else too, but as long as you make that personal, that's totally fine. If you don't have anything that is super outstanding that you might think, there's always going to be something there. And I also think maybe think about and reflect on what activities have helped you realize how you want to give back to your community, whether that be a job or some sort of extracurricular activity or whatever you want to do. I think that's an important factor to realize, is how you want to use what you have already experienced to move forward.
That's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Troy.
And I was just going to say one quick thing is, if you have a lot of seemingly unrelated information, like I definitely did, and if you looked at the activities I had done over high school, I was in mariachi, I was doing track, I was kind of all over the board. But what I think helps bring it together is a consistent narrative that again, kind of going back to who you are, helps tie that together. So for each section, you can kind of highlight one activity, and they might be completely different and they might be seemingly unrelated, but there was probably a reason that you were involved in it, and that should, again, highlight something different about you. So that's the only thing I would say.
I love that. I'm seeing a question here that said, did any of you have doubts about not being accepted? And I think something that I share often is probably the only thing that all Flinn Scholars have in common is that they never thought that they were going to get the Flinn Scholarship. So I do encourage all of you, if you're listening to the presentation and really thinking about the ways that you've been involved, and that you have been really striving to make a difference in your community in whatever way that looks like in your community, and you've taken full advantages of the resources that you've had available to you, have confidence in yourself and put the time into this application. It's an early application. It's an early application deadline in your senior year. And what I hope for all of you is that you will have the opportunity in going through our application process to really, maybe for the first time, do what Troy said, sit down and look at what you have been involved in and synthesize what is the common thread and the things that I've spent my time doing. And I think that it will really help you for the rest of your college applications and other scholarship applications, hopefully move forward with a little bit more clarity about what's driven you up until now and what you want to do in college. Let's see, got scrolling through these questions. What's one of the most meaningful activity or class that you've been involved in so far? Obviously, Eugenia, we'll skip on you since you're just getting started in recent weeks, but Edgar, do you want to kick us off by talking about something that's been formative for you at the university?
Yes. So one of the things that I did my freshman year, I was going to class Monday to Friday. On the weekends, I was doing an EMT program. So by the end of my freshman year, I was certified as an EMT, and that pretty much kickstarted everything that I had. I actually did not have a plan for my medical school application. There were many opportunities on campus to volunteer as an EMT and also off campus, everything being so close to. That was probably one of the best things I could have done because I saw a lot of things and kind of questioned myself, pushed myself. And that's when I truly think that the activity became really meaningful, is when you start pushing yourself. I keep thinking about the words of my mentor. He told me, it's like, if you think that it's easy, you're probably doing it wrong. And so I was doubting myself at first on joining this EMT program, whether I should jump it on with the rest of my course schedule, that it might be too much for me, but I ended up loving it. It was a little tough taking credits at the university and also being busy on the weekends. But that pretty much, that's all I could say. It was pretty good.
Anyone else have an experience that stands out to you? Claire, it looks like you're unmuting yourself.
Yeah, I love the honors classes at NAU. And I think, honestly, all of those classes that I've taken, but one pops out, which is one I took last semester in the spring, and it was a global poetry class, or poetry in like a global sense. And I learned so much in that class that I never thought I would want to learn about. It was kind of just something that I like to read. Maybe I will like to read poetry type thing. So I decided to give it a try to get an honors credit, basically. And oh my gosh, now I read poetry all the time because I love it. And so just, I guess the takeaway from this is that the Honors College gives you lots of opportunity to explore. And even if you decide not to go to the Honors College with whatever path you take, then just take a chance and take a class that you think sounds interesting, even if it's not related to your major at all, because you might just love it. And so, but highly recommend that.
That's great. So this next, Troy, did you have something to share?
I was just gonna plug this. If anyone goes to ASU, the prison education program is the coolest thing that you'll ever have the opportunity to do. You get, I did it with other Flinn Scholars. We had the opportunity to go and just work with people and teach them and learn about their life experiences down in Florence. And that's another kind of opportunity that will help you realize that your life is completely different, that people out there have experiences far different than your own, and I think you learn just as much as you're supposed to be teaching. So if anyone goes to ASU, join the prison education program.
Well, stay unmuted, Troy, because I think that ties into this next question that I was going to ask all of you, and that is, do you all have advice for getting into research labs or internships? So for the example that you're sharing, Troy, how did you learn about it? And in general, do you have advice for how to get involved in those types of things?
Yeah, so this was one happened completely randomly. There's a club at ASU called the Prison Education and Awareness Club, and again, the goal is to just promote education within prisons, which is found to be the largest way to reduce people returning. And so I found it fascinating. I found the research interesting, and just went to the club fair, and that's kind of how I joined. But that opportunity led to a lot of other things. Actually, that's what led to me first interacting with the Luminosity Lab, because we realized that, we might be able to improve the system further. Just kind of growing. I wrote my thesis on it, and I'm still today and working with that group. So sometimes just kind of going to the club fairs and just trying something you weren't coming into college thinking of doing can open up a lot of opportunities. So being open is really crucial.
That's great. Any differing advice on how to get involved or learn about opportunities?
I have one. So I'm in my sophomore year, and a lot of the questions that freshmen have going into any university is, how can I get involved in research? The number one thing that I hear from other professors and other people who are in research is that you can just directly email or go meet a professor that you're interested with researching, and you can just ask them if they have any openings, or like when they think they'll have openings, or what you can do in the meantime. You can just directly contact those people. And so I would recommend doing that. You can research everyone online at the university you decide to go to, and kind of just jump in yourself, make yourself stand out. So get into contact with others that you would like to do research with.
I love that. It reminds me of advice that we heard from a faculty member who joined us at the retreat this summer. He said, every semester, get to know a new professor. Take the time to get to know one of your professors, because they will be able to help you in a variety of different ways as you advance at the university and into your career. So I think one of the ways, obviously, you can get to know a faculty member is by doing research with them. But if after a class you've heard a lecture that's really intriguing, take the time to go up to them and say, I'm interested in the research that you're doing. How can I get involved? I think that's one really great way to get to know faculty on campus. So someone asked if you're satisfied with the opportunities that Flinn has granted you. And, I don't imagine that any of you are going to say, no, I'm not satisfied, at least not in this forum. But I'm curious to know if any of you have thoughts about what's been, in terms of the opportunities that Flinn has provided for you, maybe what's been most valuable, or something that you didn't expect to be a benefit coming into the Scholars Program.
I can start. I don't know if mine's entirely specific to Flinn as much as it is to being a Flinn Scholar at one of the in-state universities, and really just the in-state universities as a whole. Most of my friends from my high school went out of state. That's a very common thing in the high school I went to. Most students do go out of state. And I really thought that I wanted to go out of state for quite a while. I applied to a lot of small private universities around the country, and those can be a really great experience. I'm not trying to say anything against small private universities. My friends love them. But just sort of hearing about the opportunities they had available to them and the opportunities that I had available here at the in-state universities, I was really surprised at how early I was able to get involved in things that were just purely class restricted to them that I didn't know about. Like, I'm an undergraduate teaching assistant at the University of Arizona. I've been doing that since the summer after my freshman year. I recommended doing that to a friend of mine who's going to a different school out of state, because I thought she'd be really good at it. And she texted me back and said, oh, we're not even allowed to apply for that until we're seniors. I have a lot of friends in research. I recommended something like that to a friend of mine. She texted back and said, yeah, you can only do research when you're a junior. And things like that I just didn't realize were class restricted at a lot of the universities I was considering before. And being able to do all of that as a freshman was a really amazing experience that I didn't consider as much as I should have when I was in high school and looking at colleges.
I love that example. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Edgar, any thoughts about opportunities that you've had as a Flinn Scholar, or you know, anything that the community or the scholarship that has done to help you in your undergraduate experience?
I would say the connections. Also being part of the honors college, you can choose to take some courses as honors courses, and being that your class size will definitely be smaller. So it'd be great that sometimes after lecture you can meet up with your professor, where if you would take that course as a regular course, it might be about 300 students, and now there's only about 75 of you, and you can talk one-on-one with them, get to know them better. And having those conversations with your professors brings out a lot of things about you. And they'll be like, hey, you know, you should talk to so and so because you know they have something going on that you're interested in. And that is something that definitely surprised me my freshman year. How quick they pretty much like pull you in into other specialties and interests that probably never knew you had.
That's great. So a couple of questions I think that, well, one question I'll let you guys think about while I answer a few other just kind of process questions, but someone's all ready for the interview, which is awesome. And they're curious to know, what is your #1 piece of advice for the interview? And certainly we know that students will be interviewing not just for the Flinn Scholarship, but you know, certainly other interviews to come. So what advice do you all have for both the Flinn interview for those who advance, but for interviews in general? Anybody have advice to share?
I have one to share. So just know that the questions that your panelist asks you in any interview for a job or whatever it is, they're not trying to make you feel uncomfortable or like you don't know anything. They just want to get to know you. So you should be yourself. Feel free to have a conversation with them. Feel free to ask them questions, because that can open up a whole other conversation that might benefit you. So just know that they're not out to get you and that it's for your benefit. Even if the question seems really difficult and you weren't prepared for it, it's totally okay. They just want to see how you react, and there's no bad answer, there's no wrong answer. As long as you do answer in some capacity, then I would say that's pretty good.
I'm gonna give a piece of advice that sounds very counterintuitive. It was one of the first pieces of advice I received when I started interviewing for things. And I didn't really understand it until after I did my first interview. But it's, don't practice too much. You definitely should think about your interview before you go in. Maybe have a list of like 4 or 5 things in mind that you want to highlight or that you want to focus on in your interview. But don't spend so much time practicing for your interview or trying to guess the questions you're going to be asked that you end up rehearsing answers to things. Because then you show up in your interview thinking you know what the question is going to be, and they start asking you something, and you're like, oh, I practiced this one, I know what I'm going to say. And then the question's totally different than what you thought it was going to be. And you start answering a question that they didn't actually ask you, or you end up sounding so robotic that they don't get a sense of who you are. They just think, oh, this kid wrote a list of answers and now they're saying them. So just try to take some time and think about generally what you want to say, but don't script yourself to the point where you're not being yourself in your interview.
I love that advice. I would also say it's okay to take a minute to think about your answer. You know, you don't have to respond immediately and rush through the interview. Take a moment and think about what the interviewers are asking you, and don't be afraid to reflect for a little bit before you respond. We've got a couple of questions about, you know, what were you involved in high school? What do you think made you stand out as an applicant? So I'll let you guys think about your answer to those questions as I address a couple of the others. People have asked about whether or not there's a wait list. So I'll talk about what the awarding process looks like. So each year, our goal is to end up with a cohort of 20 students. And the way that we go about that is that we award about 23 students the scholarship each year, knowing that some students are going to turn us down, which is another question that came up. The number of students that turn us down really changes from year to year. In Troy's year, we had 22 of the 23 accept. And so for Troy and Edgar, they are a cohort larger than normal, but that was an abnormal year for us. Typically what we have is probably 5 or 6 students turn us down, which is why we have what we call an alternate list. So students at that stage find out that they're an alternate, and then on decision day, if there becomes an opening that if enough students decline the scholarship, then I start making phone calls to notify alternates that they have an opportunity to accept the scholarship. Those are some of my favorite phone calls to make, because I want to give the scholarship to every single student that we interview, because they're all amazing. And so I love the opportunity to offer the scholarship to alternates. So there's also been some questions about applying to out-of-state schools and whether or not you're allowed to apply binding decision. And at the end of the day, the Quest Bridge Scholarship is one that we know that a lot of students apply for, and you are allowed to apply for both. We will just communicate early on with students in December to find out if they've received their decisions. It's important that students notify us whether or not they've been accepted, so that we can remove you from our applicant pool, so that you don't take up a spot for another student who may advance. So back to the question that was asked about what were you involved in, or what makes you think, what do you think makes you stand out to the review committees, the interview committees? Anybody have thoughts to share?
I'll share mine first. So I had a lot of activities that were kind of unrelated, kind of like what Troy was saying earlier. I just had a lot of things kind of mushed together. But one of the things that I talked about the most in my interviews and in my essays was how I work right now at Lowell Observatory, and I was working there when I was in high school, and how that job helped me get into the field of teaching, which is something that I've never considered. And so I talked about how I would like to improve the science education of Arizona. And I really think talking about how you want to help your community is a major thing, because that's what the Flinn Foundation is for, is how you're going to improve your Arizona community. And so I think if you can really think about that and relate to that in your application, and if you make it to the interview, that's a really good thing to talk about, and just your passion around that area. That's, in my opinion, what I think made me stand out, but I don't know. The interviewers don't give me feedback, so it could have been something totally different, but that's just what I think, so.
Yeah, I had I definitely had probably the weirdest. I didn't have the traditional try and be the straight 4.0s, try and get in clubs. I really just always did what I thought was fun. And so I kind of, a lot of times my conversations were, and my letters and everything that ended up tying together was this idea that not only can you do things that are fun, but you can do important things that are fun. So I ended up getting involved with a lot of volunteering work and just teaching and just things that were different, but I enjoyed them. I did them with my friends, and that ability to kind of have an impact is something that, and have fun while doing it, is something that I still continue to this day. And so I think that was definitely probably a little unique, but I do think even if you're not one who, your whole focus is on getting the best grades and trying to be that best student, if you really believe that you and others can make a difference, I think that's important for this scholarship.
So on the topic of involvement, one of our scholars needs to leave due to some involvement on campus tonight. So thank you so much, Eugenia, for being a part of the event tonight, and best luck with your club.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to everyone on the application. Hope to see you all maybe in the next stages, and good luck.
Wonderful. Do others have any thoughts? So I have to say that one of the questions that I hate to see is, what kinds of things were you involved in? What leadership did you do? Because I think there's often this idea that there's some formula that you can follow and become a Flinn Scholar, you know, and it's not about what kind of leadership activities Edgar was involved in or what Claire did in high school. It's about what you care about and where you want to put your energy. If you are asking yourself, what's the right kind of leadership activity? You're asking the wrong question. You need to ask yourself, what do I care about? What difference do I want to make in the community? Where do my values align with the opportunities that I have to get involved? So don't worry about how they got involved or what their majors are or how many activities they were involved in. Focus on yourself and just be true to yourself and what you're, you know, what you're devoting your time to. It needs to reflect your values and your interest in making a difference in the community. And that's another question that I saw as I was scrolling through, people asking, you know, what's the number one thing that you're looking for in a scholar, or one of the most important things? And I would say there is no most important thing. It's a very comprehensive process, as it should be. It's a really, it's a long application. It's going to take you a lot of time to go through, and you know, there's 300 word max for each of the essays, and they're all different. And you've got your short answer questions, and you've got all of the activities. There's so much that you put into this application that I want you to know that it's going to be read multiple times by experienced reviewers who are really doing their best to learn more about who you are and what drives you to do the things that you do, and what evidence have you already, what evidence do we see that you're going to continue to be that kind of person who's going to make a difference in your community? And that will come through most when you are doing the kinds of things that you care about. And they can be wildly different things, as I think a few of our scholars have shared. So know that there is no one club, no one kind of leadership. We have some students that have been involved in one activity in high school and been selected as Flinn Scholars, because the way that they were devoting their time outside of that, whether it was with a full-time job and other responsibilities that they had in their life, but we saw passion and dedication to their community and a clear commitment to make a difference in all of the other things that we saw in their application. So find your true north and follow that, and don't ask yourself what the right club or activity is to be involved in. Let's see, someone is asking about whether or not there's any collaboration across the universities. I'd love to hear any of you talk about what it means to be involved, or what it means to, are you just at your, ASU bubble and you get to know just your fellow ASU scholars, or are there opportunities that you all have that expose you to your fellow scholars at the other two universities?
I can talk about this. So currently for me, I am the only one who went to NAU for my Flinn cohort, which sounds really lonely, but it's okay because we have the power of online technology where we can connect to people. And right now I can say that the Flinn cohorts all like alumni and basically a lot of people are all in this like massive group chat. So we just talk a bunch. So there's lots of opportunity to connect to others, and sometimes some of my fellow cohorts come up to like staff and they're like, hey, we can meet up or something like that. So there's always going to be opportunities, even if you go to a school where maybe there's not a lot of other Flinn scholars, but that's totally okay. There's plenty of room to connect.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. I know that you need to get off for class, so thank you for being a part of this evening, Claire.
Thank you. Good luck to everyone.
Does anybody else want to talk about the community across the three campuses?
I do have one thing. I mean, some of my best friends are down at U of A, so I know that there's definitely between U of A and ASU. There's a lot of collaboration. So and just we again, I think the trip is a unique experience where you get to meet everyone and really get to know everyone. And so I think from there, you build lifelong friendships.
That's great. Any other things to share on that? that front, I did mention that there are Flinn advisors on each campus, that they're dedicated to planning events, and the Flinn advisor at U of A is planning a cooking class and is going to invite all scholars to be a part of it. So that's just one example of the kinds of things that happen. Some of the programming that we do for scholars also brings them together a few times a year. We have a few important events that we host. One is our annual Scholars Retreat. You've seen quite a few pictures from our tug of war competition and some of the other things that happen. There's a talent show and a lot of fun things that we do together in the summer before school kicks off. And all of our scholars, current scholars, come together in Prescott for a few days for that. We also have what we call Life Hack Day. It's a professional day where we bring our scholars together with alumni to hear advice and guidance about how to make the most out of your college experience, but also how to prepare for grad school or your first job interview, you know, resume tips, negotiating salaries, all those kinds of fun professional pieces of advice. We also have the Centennial Lecture, which happens at ASU each fall, and all of our scholars are invited to come together for that. In addition to seeing the lecture that's available to anyone for free, the speaker always hosts something special, whether it's a breakfast, a lunch, or a dinner, just with Flinn Scholars to get to talk about whether it's a book that they've published or the work that they're doing. So we also plan for our scholars a few things throughout the year to bring them together. So I think probably in the interest of time, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to share something that you feel kind of parting words. What advice do you have, or what do you think we haven't talked about that would be important for prospective applicants to know about the Scholars Program or about the application process? And then we'll try and I'll do my best to answer as many of these other questions about process separately. No pressure. Okay. I'm gonna pick on the seniors first, Troy.
So this is actually, and I don't know if I've ever shared this, but I went to a Flinn session my sophomore year, and this isn't gonna for everyone. This is not advice for everyone, but this was one I heard it my senior year, and I still remember it, or my sophomore year, and I still remember it to this day. What the Flinn really truly gives you, it gives you an opportunity that you won't have anywhere else. There is a, there might be a desire to go to an Ivy League school, to go to a private school. I know there's a lot of people in our class who got opportunities to both take the Flinn or to go to these other schools. But when you look at the lifetime of returns and opportunities and experiences, there's no better investment in yourself that you could make by choosing the Flinn. And like I said, not everyone's going to understand or take that. But there's so much that the foundation gives to you, that the investment that they make into who you are going to become, that it is unparalleled for your trajectory. And so I would definitely take a look at all of the different factors. But if you are really making a decision between the Flinn and thinking that maybe you need to go to a better school or something like that, I can tell you that I'm in graduate school at University of Chicago right now, and the experiences, I was way better prepared from everything at ASU. It's unbelievable. The classes, the professors, they are even better than some of the classes I've had at University of Chicago. So you really get an unparalleled experience, and so I especially for your undergrad. So I would say that to everyone, especially if you come down to that moment in the future.
That's great. Edgar, you want to go next?
Of course. So I said this once at a session that I spoke to at the U of A freshman year. I love saying this: don't be a cookie cutter student. And those words, that's the reason why I decided to come to one of Arizona's public universities. Going out of state seems like a big old deal about, oh, Ivy League. But here in Arizona, you do have those experiences like that Troy was talking about, that I feel that have pushed me further in the direction that I want to go to, in the way that I want to see myself in the future as a professional. And even with the application process, whether it is Flinn or with another scholarship, I know we keep saying these words about being yourself, and it's kind of hard because you're already stressing out about, what are those key points. And it's basically what I'm going to say, it's like a summary of what we had mentioned before. There's really no like key points that you need to say in your application or in your interview. My worst and best part of this application process has to be the interviews, because I was freaking out. I was so nervous. I was like sweating during the interview and still walking out and saying like, oh my gosh, it's like the last time I'm going to see the Flinn Foundation. But as long as you remain true to yourself, and you really think about what you're passionate about, what are your interests, that's all going to show on your application. That's going to show in your interviews. Because I did see that one question about what if I'm only interested in like one thing, or I've only been doing one thing throughout high school. Make the best of it, because I mean, even though it's just one thing, you can have 10 experiences, but if you didn't learn anything out of them, they don't really matter. So that's kind of like what I've been living with since from high school, and even here at the U of A. You might just stick to one thing, but you probably will get a lot of development out of it. So best of luck to everyone in this process.
Thank you, Edgar. Caroline?
Hi, I would definitely echo everything Troy and Edgar said about the opportunities that you get from Flinn. But I really want to come back to something we talked about earlier, which is the people that you meet through the foundation, both in your interviews, if you make it to that stage, and in the scholarship, if you're a scholar. I can honestly say that I would not be the person that I am today if I hadn't met the scholars in my class and in other classes. I've learned so much from them. I've grown so much from them. We're all so different. We all have so many different interests and so many different things that we do. I learned about opportunities I didn't even know existed from other scholars. And I've just had the most amazing time meeting so many different people. I really thought when I was coming into my senior year of high school that I wanted to go out of state. Almost everyone at my high school does. I really thought that was what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I met all of the people at the foundation that I really was able to see the communities that exist in state. And because I thought I needed a small school. I came from a very small high school. I didn't think I could make it in a huge university. I thought that I would get completely lost in a sea of that many people. And it was through the Flinn Scholar program that I was able to really find a family to go to school with and find a small community that I knew, okay, I can survive in a school that's big because I have these people to fall back on, and I know that they're going to be there for me no matter what. So that was really important to me.
Oh, I love to hear that. Thank you all for sharing.